All right, welcome everyone. We'll give it a second for people to trickle in. Awesome. Well, I will kick off the conversation by saying thank you so much from the James Beard Foundation for being here today for the James Beard Foundation X Queer Food Foundation virtual panel series. So I was super excited to be here, and I will now pass it off to Vanessa, who will kick off the conversation and session.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. This is our final queer all year panel of the year. And I think my favorite one so far, this is the Queer Beverage panel. Thank you again to Bento Box for sponsoring. Thank you guys for taking the time out on your Monday to join us for this conversation. Please follow us if you don't already follow us already. Follow Bento Box and James Beard and all these lovely people that you're going to hear from today as well. Give them some support. Kayla is our moderator, who is an amazing advisory board member of Queer Food Foundation. So I hope you guys enjoy the conversation. We will have a few moments after for Q&A. So if you want to put your Q&A questions in during the conversation, we'll be checking on them and answer some at the end of the panel.
Perfect. Thank you, Vanessa. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining. My name is Kayla. My pronouns are she, her. I am based in Southern Virginia. And I'm really excited to have a conversation about queer folks in beverage who are, killing the game, apparently. So if everyone's okay with it, if we could go around and just do name, location, pronouns, and what organization you work with and what your role is. You can start with John. Oh, I think you're on mute. Sorry.
I'm John DeBerry, and I don't know how to use Zoom. I'm based in New York. I use he pronouns, and I am an author. I'm also one of the co-founders and current board president for Restaurant Workers Community Foundation. And I'm also the founder of the soon-to-be RIP non-alcoholic beverage brand Proto. Do you want me to popcorn to someone else?
Yeah, let's go with Darwin. Not to put you on the spot or anything.
Okay, I'm also don't know how to use Zoom today. Good morning, everyone. My name is Darwin Acosta. My pronouns are they, them. I am currently the founder and president of Co-Fermented, which is an organization that helps to bring more advocacy, awareness, and community for LGBTQIA wine professionals. And I am a New York City native, but I am based in Napa, California, and work at Scribe Winery as a wine educator.
All right, Liz.
My name is Liz Rubin, and I live in San Francisco, California. My day job is I am the wine buyer for Buy Right Market. It's a small grocery store here in San Francisco, and I'm co-founder of Somebody's Sister, which is a lesbian, dyke, hella queer organization. We have parties and it's basically a wine bar pop-up in San Francisco, celebrating queer and female winemakers. And I do it with my partner, Pamela, who is also on the panel today. And my pronouns are she, her.
Perfect. Pamela.
Here we go. I'm Pamela Busch. Pronouns are they, them. And I am the founder and executive director of the Vanguard, which is a social justice organization in the wine industry that I started. I started many years ago, but it became an official nonprofit in 2020. I am also, along with Liz, one of the founders and partners of Somebody's Sister, which we started a little bit over a year ago to provide a space for queer identified women and non-binary people to come and drink natural wine. So we do pop-ups on both sides of the bay, the East Bay, San Francisco. And other than that, I'm also one of the executive directors of KXSF, which is a community radio station in San Francisco. And I have a show called Fifth Wave Radio, Queerly Drinking, that amplifies the voices and discusses the work of people who are queer, female, non-binary, and sometimes we do all this while we're drinking natural wine in the studio.
Sounds amazing. Betsy and Alison.
Hi, I'm Betsy Lay, co-founder and owner of Lady Justice Brewing in Aurora, Colorado, and we are a social enterprise brewery that takes funds from our profits and gives them to the community, basically.
Hello, I'm Alison Wsineski. My pronouns are she, her, as are Betsy's.
Oh,
Let me swoop in there. And I'm the director of marketing and co-owner of Lady Justice. We're also married, which makes it super fun and chill and easy. And then I also work full-time in marketing at Sticker Giant, a sticker and label company in Longmont, Colorado.
Perfect. So to get started, I'm going to ask like a cliche question, but one I think that could be helpful for some people. I think for a lot of us in food and beverage, specifically in beverage, we had like one aha or spark moment that made us decide to do this crazy little thing. So what was your spark moment? When did you realize that this was the industry for you and that there was space for you in the industry? And we can start with Pamela.
When I made the decision in 1991 not to start the graduate program I was about to begin at NYU. And I spent the summer on the West Coast. I was working in New York at Astor, which those of you in New York probably know Astor. And I came back, and instead of getting ready to go to graduate school, I said to myself, like, I'm moving to San Francisco, and I moved out here. I wasn't 100% sure that I would have a career in the wine industry, but I knew that there were enough things that were interesting me about it where I wanted to stay in it for a while. And that's pretty much, that was over 30 years ago.
Amazing. Betsy and Alison, what about you guys?
You know, for me, it was, we founded Lady J because it was a problem. It was a fundraising problem. It was a solution to a fundraising problem that we had. So the only reason I got into beverage was because beer was the catalyst to get money funneled back into our community. So I was a drinker primarily, and that's how this idea happened. It was a few too many beers with some friends, and so for us, it was about how do we harness this energy that people put around gathering over community. You know, why do we break bread together? Why do we gather around tables? Why do people choose to eat and drink together? Especially during harder times. We founded Lady J during the recession. And so for us, it was all about using the community that beverage can build to help give back and to help fund some of these projects that were desperately needed in our community. So that's how I got into it. I was never going to do it. I was never going to be a brewer. I was never going to own a brewery. I had zero interest in any of that until it became clear that that beer was such an integral part of the communities that we were already a part of.
I got into it from nepotism of being married to Betsy, who brewed the beer, and I'm the only one with a marketing background. And they were like, "How does a logo work? What's a website?" So that's kind of a cheater answer, but I have just been along for the ride of watching my wife learn how to brew beer, how to open a business, and here we are today, brewing beer and owning a business.
Okay, John, what about you?
I think I'm a lot like everybody else, where I really had no intention of becoming a beverage professional. After graduating college, I thought I was going to go to law school. I was working for an agency that investigated police misconduct in New York City. I was traveling for a bit, and I came back and I had no job. And I just begged anybody that I knew for a job. And one of my friends was an opening bartender at a place called PDT, which is a little hidden speakeasy in St. Mark's Place. I had no bar background. I had no idea what I was doing, but I got a couple of shifts behind the bar, and very quickly it just became such a satisfying place to be in terms of having a job that necessitated connection with people. So rather than being a bureaucrat where you're kind of pushing papers around and nothing much that satisfying happens, when you're making a drink for someone and they're sitting in front of you and you put something together with them in mind, and then it changes their day instantaneously, was just such a rewarding experience. And that was 15 years ago, and my career has sprawled outward ever since.
Okay, Liz.
I moved to San Francisco in 2007. And I think I was like really just right from the start inspired by people in the beverage and hospitality industry who were, activists in their own right and doing like really amazing things to push the industry. And then coming up in wine, I saw the opposite of that. I saw a lot of misogyny. I saw a lot of patriarchal thinking and how to close doors on those. And I just really wanted to be one of the gatekeepers that opens those doors and is part of the change in that industry. So that's really why I'm here.
And last but certainly not least, Darwin.
I relate a lot to what Liz just said. I finished culinary school in 2020 and I had 4 weeks left to graduate, and I was en route to go into research and development with my food science degree into Starbucks and Pepsi. And then when the pandemic hit, it kind of made me refocus on, okay, what is it that I really enjoy doing, and which aspect of the beverage industry do I see myself going into? But I couldn't go into service because there was no service until early 2021. So I decided to apply for the Roots Fund, and I ended up getting a harvest position and moving all the way from New York to Napa. And I've always wanted to move to the West Coast, so it just kind of happened that way. And then after just being here, I also met a lot of people that were in the just recently moved into the wine space that were really trying to make change a lot of the issues with the industry. And I myself, being non-binary and having they them pronouns, faced a lot of different many discriminatory moments with a lot of people in production or much older white men. So I also did not have a queer space in Napa. I always had to go down to the Bay Area, and I felt like I could do something about it. So that's pretty much also how Co-Fermented started. And ever since I started Co-Fermented, I just I keep feeling much more grounded in that being in the wine industry is exactly where I need to be.
Great. I love that. I think that everyone that I've met in beverage is coming from somewhere else, right? So I like that. We're a motley crew. I started as an engineer, obviously not doing that now. So my next question sort of surrounds identity. So what does it mean to you to sort of queer a beverage space? Or how does your queer identity inform how you show up in professional spaces? And for this one, you guys can, fight for whoever goes first or last.
We're ready. Okay, we can do it. She's like, you want to do this? So beer is craft beer specifically, when you think about it, it's straight white bearded dudes. And we've worked really hard to just exist in the space, right? So that's kind of step one. And we've always existed in the space. I
want to say the craft beer industry wants you to believe that it's straight white bearded dudes, but it's not. Yeah.
So that's the part that, for us, we have always been craft beer drinkers. I actually grew up in the beer space. My stepdad worked at Miller Coors all of my life. And so beer has been a part of my upbringing. I'm from Milwaukee, so it's just beer is part of who I am. Betsy's from St. Louis. Beer is part of who she is. And so we knew we existed in those spaces. Our co-founders, Kate and Jen, knew we existed in those spaces. We looked around in where we are in Denver, and we saw a lot of ourselves reflected in that, but we didn't see it reflected in leadership. We didn't see it reflected in a lot of the spaces in which we occupied the higher up you went. And so for us, it's speaking in spaces like this, it's going to craft beer events and answering a lot of the same questions over and over. A common one is, but who brews your beer? No, but who brews it? That's a fun and funny question that we have gotten more creative with answering, because it's us, right? It's us. It's our Latina brewer that we have at Lady J. It's all, and then, you know, we brew with other women brewers, other queer brewers, it's a much wider space than what people think it is. And so we work to make sure that we're reflecting that on our social media when you walk in the door, making sure that others can see themselves in the space, because that helped us get started ourselves, right? We knew who we were drinking with, and we know that that exists in craft beer. So kind of flipping that narrative on its head of who drinks beer, because it's us, right? We have a large queer community that comes into our space that proves that every day.
Mhm.
I'll go. I mean, I think we clear the space by creating the space and also by taking up space. I think that's really important. You know, being in San Francisco in the early 2000s, seeing spaces like the Lexington Club, which at the time was like the only lesbian bar in San Francisco, that closed. It was such a tragedy to not have that space to gather, but also like less and less safe spaces for queer people. So, you know, just, yeah, I think just like taking up the space. As somebody's sister, we want to build up and promote other businesses by popping up in them. That's reason to be a pop-up, is to support those that you know, the places that you inhabit, and to make people know about them. So yeah, that's what I would say.
I see Pamela has risen a hand.
Yeah,
Would you like to?
yeah, no, my hand's up. Just to add on to what Liz said a little bit, which is like, I remember San Francisco during a time like in the 90s when there was a thriving like side culture going on here. And it changed, you know, pretty much by the end of the decade, the beginning of the 2000s. And it was like, as someone coming from New York, getting into the industry I was in, still being really young, I felt like I had an opportunity to really like, I just showed up and was myself. And I had an opportunity. I mean, I would go to these wine tastings that was all a bunch of guys, you know, white guys in suits. And I would show up on my motorcycle and just be who I was. And I was like opened up the second wine bar in the city. So, and I did it with someone who was actually my partner, you know, when we first started it. So it was a very high profile queer and like queer women owned business too. So I think that just by always being yourself and not being afraid to be there, and doing it, you're not just doing it to make money. I mean, I've seen some people who've come out recently, you know, and as being queer in different ways, and I think that's awesome. But I see where they're doing it in a way which is purely just, it almost feels exploitive, because they haven't had the guts to come out yet, and then all they talk about is why you should support their business. And I mean, I think that's okay, but there's no and. It's like, be part of the community. You know, you could do so much. I think that if you do things for your community, you're going to build your following. And that, like, that's just something that I've learned, you know, having been in this industry for 30 years. It's just like, go out there, be yourself, and don't be afraid.
Darwin, I saw that you also raised your hand.
Yeah, I would agree 1000% with what Pamela said, because I also came into this space, and moving up into Napa, didn't have much community, but coming from New York City and coming and finishing college where I had so much support, I was like trying to find my new chosen family on this side of the West Coast, or on this side of the world. And once I started Co-Fermented, it's like, I always question myself, like, is this like, is this what I should be doing? Is this like what I should be going into? And whenever I host events, people show up and people tell me like, thank you so much for putting this space together. So definitely like taking up space, hosting those events, bringing in winemakers that are LGBTQIA, representing their brands. Even if I'm not hosting a massive event and I'm doing a pop-up somewhere where I'm representing like my cuisine, I want to bring in those wines. So it's like they always have a voice, or they're on someone's table and I can tell their stories for them, because that's how you keep building community. And that's really what has kept me going, is this a wonderful support system that I've had since I moved here. I also show up queer by just being very gender bending with my fashion. I will show up very colorfully in rooms that are very stuffy and white and male and all in suits. I will show up as fabulous as I can, just to kind of shift the narrative on like, I can also be a wine professional if I am still dressed like this. It doesn't really matter.
It's amazing. And I will say, I just got back from 3 months working harvest on the West Coast. And that's how Darwin and I know each other. They're fabulous. And their events are fantastic. So if any of you are on the West Coast while Co-Fermented is throwing an event, it's heartwarming, it's beautiful, they're amazing.
And Pamela and I have been hosting events together recently, and I think we're probably going to continue doing some more in the future. They're called Wine Flair, so stay tuned for those. Might be coming to a city near you.
Amazing. John, do you have anything to add?
I do, yeah. I'm really glad I went last, because other people articulated what I was thinking much better than I was planning to. So what Pamela said about showing up as yourself, I think was something that was really important to me early in my career, in terms of, in 2008, when I started bartending, all the craft bartenders either looked like Orson Welles or aspired to look like Orson Welles, and it was very kind of like straight male, kind of rooted in 1870s kind of New York aesthetic. And I tried to fit in at first because I was so new, but then after a while I was like, fuck that. So I wasn't wearing lipstick back then, but I started just like aggressively pushing the boundaries of what I could get away with my uniform, and started changing the way that the drinks that I was doing on the menu. Like, I was the first person to put a blue drink on a very stuffy cocktail menu. And then just kind of, shifting the kind of narrative, as Darwin was saying, about what it looks like to be someone with authority in this industry, it feels kind of cosmetic and sort of aesthetic, but it really actually is pretty meaningful when you're trying to sort of reshape what an industry looks like. So that's just sort of something I've been pushing ever since, I realized I could get away with wearing a pink bow tie. And now today I do videos online and I'm wearing lipstick, and half the people are like, your lipstick is super cool. And then other people are like, barf, like, who is this? Like, people call me it on YouTube comments. So it's really just have to kind of be constantly out there, and just be yourself really aggressively. And then also at the same time, work to do more structural changes in terms of like supporting your peers, like, kind of networking horizontally and highlighting spaces that you're being invited into, or other places that you want other people to see. And then that kind of bleeds into what the work that I'm doing with Restaurant Workers Community Foundation, and trying to sort of undo a lot of the structural oppression that exists in the restaurant industry, which homophobia and transphobia and misogyny is a huge part. So.
Great. I want to sort of expand on something that I think a lot of people have talked about, which is being able to show up as yourself in professional spaces and being unapologetic about it. I was curious how everyone felt about doing the same when you're solely customer facing, because that's something I think that a lot of people, now that fine dining is back, or restaurant work is sort of in the forefront again, can be a little difficult to navigate, especially when you're new in the industry. So if anyone had any advice, feel free to jump in, or any thoughts. Anyone? Bueller? Pamela, yes, thank you.
Well, I think that that representation matters. And if you're in a customer facing position, a lot of your customers might be queer, or they might be different in one way or another. And that if I think that the best way you can make someone feel really comfortable by just being there, and again, just being yourself and not trying to hide who you are. Granted, most of my career has been in San Francisco, where there are a lot of people who are queer, but I think that I think that's true everywhere. I think that especially if you work in the industry in a place where there isn't as much of like open queerness, you almost have a responsibility to like really be there and show up as who you are, because like that's how things change, is through representation, and that's how you be a really good leader, is just is to set an example. So I don't think there's any real magic sauce for it. I think it's the same thing of just like, be who you are and don't be afraid to discuss things. Like I've been in situations where I've worked for myself most of my career, but there have been times when I've worked as a consultant and people would say like, oh, we don't want to discuss this. Like, it's like, then that's not the place for me. If you can't really, especially when you work in a business where there's alcohol, you're going to have conversations with people about politics and about a range of things. And you need to not feel stifled to do that. So I think that it's, as I was saying, earlier, just really showing up as who you are, makes it may sound like a little thing, but can make all the difference.
Great. Betsy and Alison.
Yeah, I think this is also where, talking what Liz was saying earlier about just being in the space and taking up the space is really important. And, we have the privilege at Lady J of being in charge and having the ownership of the company and being able to take up the space and create space for more folks to come in. And so for us, and this also goes sort of along with being a woman in the industry, craft beer, only 2% of breweries are owned solely by women. And then we don't have official data on LGBTQ plus representation in breweries, but we know it's lower than 2%. And so, Lady J being both of those, we're sort of this unicorn where, as Pam was saying, like we have, I feel a great sense of responsibility to keep showing up and keep existing and to keep making sure that we're opening our doors both in our employment, but also in our, taproom space and who we're selling our products to in distribution as well. Like all of that, we have a responsibility to make those opportunities for other people. And so on the taproom space, that's where folks see us the most, and also in our social spaces. Those are the two places where folks see us the most, which makes a lot of sense. But we tend to hire, a lot of our beer tenders come from being regulars at the bar, and when they see that we're hiring, they jump on it. And so I think every single bartender that we have right now started as a regular who was drinking at Lady J, and they started like that. A lot of them will tell us that Lady Justice was one of the first queer spaces that they knew that they felt like they could be themselves drinking in. Mm-hmm. So we'll get folks all the time who will move to Denver and they won't know where the queer spaces are. And they start at Lady J, and then they start asking our bartenders and our regulars.
It's like the Slack question from staff. They're like, all right, we need a new updated list. Where are the cool queer spaces? Where are we going? And like, just because folks are asking regularly, which means they feel comfortable enough to do so, and they see themselves reflected in the staff to do it.
Yeah. So yeah, representation matters, and continually opening up the space for other folks. I think that's right on, Pamela, where we have a responsibility to stick around and to keep passing this on to the next generation of beverage folks as well.
It makes a difference too, Darwin. Thank you for saying that part of like when you show up and you're wiped out and you're like, I can't do this again. The Club Q shooting was really hard on us. It was really close. It's really frightening to be a queer bar nearby. And that next day I was like, I don't want to open the bar. I don't feel safe, and I'm really upset. And instead we opened the bar and we held space and we cried, and we were together in that way. I think And having folks come in and say, this is the first place I knew I wanted to be, means that we have shown up and done the work to make people feel like that's where they can be, right? So like, it matters to do it even on the days when it's so hard. And it's been a hard season. So being able to do that and knowing you're doing it right.
Liz, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, I think also it's important to let the products that you represent, or the makers of those products that you represent, carry the message for you too. I think if anybody is watching from the retail sphere, it's so important to have a point of view, because you're not, a point of view that is carried through in your product set. If you're not the one on the soapbox all the time and the one that's like speaking about it, like let those products and let those makers really tell that story for you too.
Yeah, I agree with that 1000%. Because like when you walk into a space and if you're focusing on a specific, group of people based on your products, then it's like that is also spreading the message for you. I will also say it's something I always tell myself when I am going into these spaces or I'm hosting an event or planning an event, is like, you have to be the change you want to see. And for me, like not being able to see a space here for myself made me want to just curate that more. But I knew that there were more people that were also looking for safe spaces where they can gather and connect with community. So everything just kind of like ends up happening so beautifully. And yeah, once you like have a group, like a really successful event, it just like keeps your gears going. And there are a lot of people in this world that might want to erase us, and that also really adds a fire to my ass. Sorry for that. To just keep on going and pushing.
Thank you. Those are really interesting answers. And I think also what I'm hearing a lot about is community in general as a concept and how it affects how we move within spaces. So I guess one of my questions also is sort of the difference between like your local micro community and the macro global community, and how you guys may tailor your message, or, and by tailor I don't mean change, but how do you appeal to both, or do you try to appeal to both as leaders in the industry? I'm sorry, I will start with John.
I think that's a really good question. It's hard to separate local and macro when you live in like a huge metropolitan like New York City. So yeah, I think that the message is the same. I think that when you're tailoring a message to perhaps maybe individuals and like your one-on-one kind of audience, you can be more specific and more deliberate in terms of what you're telling people where to go or who to see or what to buy or how to approach something, versus when you're trying to like maybe speaking on a wider public platform. It can be a bit more general in terms of just like providing some kind of boundaries around what you should be doing and thinking and buying and places you should be going. But I think ultimately, like the core message is that being yourself is a kind of a radical act, and how you do that either with an individual sitting in front of you or whether you're on a screen, it's really the same core thing that you're doing. It's just on a different scale.
Betsy and Alison.
So we have this unique challenge with Lady Justice in that we're a 45-person capacity tap room in Aurora, Colorado, who gets national news coverage because we're woman-owned, queer-owned, right? So like we do this dance constantly back and forth of, we are releasing this new beer this week. Did you know that less than 2% of breweries are woman-owned? Like we're like doing that dance constantly, and that's what I'm working on all the time with our social media and with our website. And I work pretty hard to make sure that no matter what the language is in those types of posts or on websites or when we're doing those types of interviews, we're keeping the same imagery, because that's the part that like nothing there is changing, right? Like who we have coming into our space is not changing. Who we are is not changing, other than like rearranging seating. Like our tap room is very noticeable. We have large mural art. We have like, we're going to make sure that what you see is truth through and through and through. We're not changing the message to change audiences, but sometimes it's, you know, if we get a national news hit, then it's a reintroduction. Here's who we are. Here's what we do. These are the ways in which we partner with community. Because a lot of the messages are like, why can't I get your beer at my liquor store in Hanover? And it's like, oh, we're actually really small. We love getting this coverage. You should come visit us, right? Like, it's reworking that same messaging, but it's the same message through and through. It's just making sure that people, we're not tailoring it or switching it to make someone think we're something we're not. We're always the same queer brewery on East Colfax in Aurora doing the same stuff. We're growing and we're changing, but it's the same imagery so that folks, when they walk in, they're going to see exactly what we've been presenting to them.
Great. My next question is sort of surrounds access. So, you know, there's been like this years-long explosion of interest, I guess, in like craft beverage. So craft beer, microbrews, like low intervention wine, mixology, like as an art form. And I think maybe slightly less so now, but definitely in the beginning, it felt very inaccessible. And I think especially for queer folks who felt like they didn't have like the expertise or the language to speak about these things. How do you go about sort of making it accessible for queer folks, right? Because that's our community. So how do we reach out to the community in a way that, you know, isn't wrapped up in jargon or exclusivity, especially when we're talking about things that, you know, can be expensive, can feel exclusive. And I'll start with Darwin because I feel like we sort of had this conversation before.
Yeah, I was gonna say, when it comes to hosting events, I make an emphasis on making sure that people, if I'm gonna have a ticketed event, that people can afford it. So I try to always have like a sliding scale for tickets, whether, let's say I want $50 a ticket, but I will probably charge an industry price or do 25 to 50 and you pay what you can afford, or have like half subsidized and fully subsidized option because I want people to be able to come. Everyone is in a different financial place. I don't come from a very wealthy family background either. So I always like, there are many things and things I can't do because I can't afford it. So I just want to make sure that people can financially afford it as well. And I've been looking at partnering a lot more with like other people that are doing LGBTQI work in this area, specifically like the LGBTQI connection in Napa and Sonoma, to be able to start helping youth that are going to be going into that 21-year-old stage that, you know, live in this area where the largest demographic of jobs is working in wineries and in tasting rooms, and trying and like showcasing and introducing to them like, this is, you know, a potential career path. This is the work I do to create awareness. This is how I execute it. And there are people creating safe spaces for you in this industry. So that's kind of how I'm approaching the access part of it, because I definitely feel like when you introduce a certain industry or job field to the youth, like it can like create this thing in their head where they're like, oh my God, this is so cool, I might want to do this. So because I've had a lot of support in high school that has led me into the beverage space. And I think that's really a good way to approach it.
Perfect. Betsy and Alison.
Yeah, accessibility. You know, we also, anytime that we can provide events for your cheap, we do. And you know, we started Lady J with a membership only model because we were tiny and didn't have space for a tap room. So we had to we had to build our mission around how do we do this work when we only have, you know, 125 people who can access our beer. And that was tough for us because that's sort of against the purpose of what we're trying to do. When we moved into our taproom space, and we actually had to rewrite our mission statement so that we could include physical space in the work that we were doing. And so we spent a lot of time trying to figure out how do we make our taproom a part of our mission statement, and how do we make sure it's accessible to our community. So we offer free or discounted events and beer for the nonprofits in our area. And then I think, we also try to make, stuff like merch. We try to get wide variety of merchandise that's not just sized, and then sized stuff has to be from, extra small and small all the way up to 3X, we're allowed. And then, we have, oh, yeah, there it is. So we try to do that as well, so that, we don't assume we know what anybody coming in the tap room has experienced or looks like. And then, I don't know, I mean,
a big accessibility piece is when you hear beer, you probably have a reaction to it, especially if you work in the beverage industry where you're like, God, if I hear IPA one more time. So it's like, what we want to do is create a space that when you walk in the door, our staff is trained to ask questions and be really open, which is not the norm in craft beer. So meeting someone where they are and saying, what's a drink that you like? And if someone says wine, it's like, okay, you're going to love our hard seltzer. Let us tell you why. We use actual pink guava. Like, we walk through, we give people free samples. We explain what this is, because this industry is craft, right? We want you to feel like you're a part of the space. That's meeting someone where they are. And then it usually turns into bigger conversations. That's how we've gotten our nonprofit partners and given them the space to come in and talk about their work. It's someone who comes in and they're like, I just heard you guys were kind of cool and you partnered with this nonprofit next door. I work at a nonprofit. It's all of it is conversation, right? So that accessibility piece is just meeting folks where they are.
And Pamela.
So when we talk about accessibility, there's like two things, probably more, but it's also trying to make it financially accessible to people. And there are ways that you can do that with like having a sliding scale, trying to have some items that are less expensive, but it's also have accessibility where people have a sense of belonging. And I think that's something that is really, we definitely try to do that with Somebody's Sister, with the Vanguard's different events that we do. That's also important for us. So pretty much every space that's not like called a queer space, the default is that it's like a heteronormative space, and that the culture and the way you do things is this very sort of, what we just sort of take for granted, where the default is, as around like heterosexual mores. And I think that you can make your space more accessible to people if that's not the default. And there are lots of ways you could do that. It's by the people who you hire, the people who work for you. If you have people who are working for you who are diverse, not everyone who's queer looks the same and is the same too. So I think that just, saying, oh, you're gonna have a queer space, but it's not just about having a queer space and having everyone be like, a 20-something-year-old white person who works for you. I think having like, when you have age diversity, when you have people with different skin tones, and people who are, might identify as queer in one way but or another, I think that really creates a sense of like, yeah, there's a place for me here too. Just to kind of add on to that, especially in the natural wine space, natural wine is more expensive. And I'm not saying I think it's overpriced. I think that there are reasons why some really good reasons why natural wine tends to be a little bit more expensive. But it is also your job, if this is where you hang your hat, to really go out there and try to find products, wines that are going to be a little bit more accessible. Now, you're not going to be able to offer an $8 glass of wine in San Francisco anyway. But that doesn't mean that that every wine that you offer has to be $18. There are ways that you can still go out there and try to find some wines that that pretty much fall into what you're looking for, where that might be like $12, $13 a glass too.
That's great. John, I saw that you unmuted.
Yeah, just wanted to add, I think that working in, I don't work in directly consumer-facing spaces anymore. I don't work in restaurants in a while, but the hospitality mindset, I think, is so valuable to learn, whether or not you're actually working in literal hospitality. I think that even within the kind of broader queer community, white supremacy, misogyny, and transphobia are still very much at play. And if you're creating a queer space and you're seeing just one type of person show up, that usually means you need to do more work to make everyone else feel included. So just kind of not stopping at just saying, oh, this is a queer space, check. You have to really think about who you're bringing in and how. And hospitality for me is like imagining you're the other person experiencing what you're giving them. And so if you're not doing that with every person who's coming across your space or your brand or your product, then you need to do a little more work to kind of unpack that.
I wholeheartedly agree. So we are running a little bit low on time, so we'll do one more question. And this will be for everyone. For those who are brand new in the industry, like think just passed the CMS level 1, just decided they were interested in beer, just took a bartending class, and they decided this is the industry that they want to be in. What advice do you have for them if they want to start their own, create their own space, or become a leader in the industry? Let's start with Liz.
I think just like starting to put themselves out there in any way possible, whether it's, the good old informational interview. I actually had one with Pamela like many years ago before we ever met. I contacted them and said like, let's have a chat. And I went to their wine bar and we chatted and like, look where we are today. I think just like meeting people face to face is such an amazing, magical thing. Putting yourself on social media in different ways, and also just supporting businesses and organizations that are doing the things that excite you. Just get out there.
I 1000% agree. Go to the conventions. And I always tell people, and I try to do it with myself, if I'm going to like a wine event or a tasting event or whatever, I try to bring a +1. And a person who, might not go to these events, doesn't really understand, wants to learn more, because you're helping someone and you're like spreading the message. But yeah, just go for it. It took me 3 months before I was like, you know what, I'm just gonna start this and then we'll see what happens. And it was really successful. And when people see that you're actually doing it with a lot of intention, a lot more, like the community will come together.
Great. John, do you have anything to add?
I think that being kind of taking a risk is really important, but I think also at the same time recognizing kind of the boundaries of what you're comfortable doing and the safety that you may or may not have in various situations. Like I recognize that just physically working behind the bar where I was at this cocktail bar where people waited 3 hours to work, 3 hours to get in, and it was this really like hallowed space. I could kind of get away with more than if I was out there, with people on the floor or in another, had a more vulnerable body than I do now. So I think it's definitely, you want to be like strike that balance between being yourself and not shying away from expressing yourself, but then also being really smart about your own safety, physically and mentally.
And Pamela.
Yeah, I'm not sure I have anything to add that hasn't been said already. I just think it is really important to go out there and put yourself out there. I also think that people shouldn't feel the pressure to do things like the CMS and or the various exams. I mean, I actually am not a big fan of them. I think that they perpetuate a patriarchal white supremacist mindset within the wine industry. So I don't advise people to do that. But I think it's important to find your community within whatever you're doing, like within wine or beer, or like you're working in like the cocktail world. There are like your little communities within that and within different spaces. And I think it's really important to find the people who really kind of get what you want to do and what you're about as well. And that's not to say you have to be friends with everyone, but it is it's important to find these people who understand what what you are trying to do, what your journey is going to be, and who you are, and who are going to accept you for who you are. I think that we should look at like certain cliques that spring up in things with a little bit of suspicion, because there's always a lot of gatekeeping that comes along with that. And when you see people who are gatekeepers, just I think it's good to like look at what they're doing so you don't really do the same thing too, because that's where you do create exclusivity. So I mean, just to kind of go along with everything that I've been saying is like, it's just really important to be who you're going to be, find your footing, and also like really believe in yourself. And especially if you're queer, you're often through your life, your self-esteem is getting knocked down. And we all have value, we all have something to contribute, and really see like what your strengths are and go and put it out there, and never feel like you're lesser than anyone else, or that because you're different that you don't have as much of a right to be there. And yeah, I just think like that's so important, and just don't conform to what everyone else is telling you to do.
Great. And Betsy and Alison.
No, we don't have anything to add. That was all really good.
We're just sitting here like, yeah,
Yeah,
that,
right.
yeah, do that. Yeah.
Okay, if no one else has anything to add, we can move on to a couple of.
Liz had her hand up, yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry, I did not see it. Go ahead.
Oh, good. Yeah, I think like, especially in wine, there's this, the whole like fake it till you make it mentality is like really real. And I just want to say like, there's so much power in just being vulnerable and being like, I don't know this. I want to learn this. Like, tell me, like, let me learn from you. Like, just being vulnerable and getting yourself out there in that way too, like, is it can be magical, no need to fake it till you make it. Let's learn together. We're all learning here.
Yeah, I was like, just gonna say, like, ask questions, and like we're all literally in this together, being in this space, being radicals in this space, making space for other people, and definitely finding the community that fills your cup like every day, because going into this work, yeah, it can be a little bit exhausting sometimes and frustrating, but also very, very, very rewarding and just like soul filling.
That's amazing. I guess if I were to sum it up, everyone saying be yourself, be confident, and kind of put yourself out there, network. Also, one thing I'd like to add is also don't change I see this a lot. I came from a fine dining background, but stop changing the way that you speak to people, because when you start describing wine in like gooseberry and like tarragon, marjoram, like you lose people and you will lose your community doing that. So anyone in the wine industry, please just, if it smells like a pineapple, just say it smells like a pineapple. It's okay. Someone will understand what you're trying to say. That's my 2 cents.
Yeah. 1,000%. Like I add a bunch of flair when I'm like hosting a tasting. I'm like, yeah, she's luscious, she's amazing. Like just, or I try to be much more gender neutral now. So it's like, add fun to it, because people just want to be able to relate, and they're like, well, I don't understand what that means. And then it's like, you lose people in that way.
Definitely. So onto the Q&A portion. We have a fun question. What is your standard drink? And you guys can, whoever starts can just popcorn around.
I'm an old-fashioned lady. I don't take my work home with me. I really love whiskey.
Yeah. I love rosé and I love gin, and those things make sense together, which is why I like them.
Liz, yeah, perfect.
I'll go the classic route. I'm a champagne person. Drink it with everything.
John, you want to go ahead?
I like anything with bubbles. So just whatever it is, if there's carbonation in it.
Okay, and Darwin.
I if I had to choose a drink, I love gin and tonics, but I also just love anything with some bubbles. I've been really on a champagne kick these last like 3 months.
And Pamela, what about you?
Wine. That's how really like got into the industry, because I'm sorry to say this, but I've never been a huge beer drinker. I mean, I'm okay. I drink beer sometimes, but like in college when everyone was drinking beer, I just started drinking wine. So yeah, and I mean, I love myself some champagne, but I'm happy to. There are just so many types of amazing wines that are available now, and it's just the exploration of it is part of the thrill.
Okay, and the next question, if I want to bring more beverages from queer producers into a restaurant, is there any sort of database or resource that exists where I can find these producers? Or does anyone have any recommendations of a good place to start when I'm buying beverages with this intention?
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of a hard, I mean, honestly, just like that's a hard one. I'll just like jump in here for a sec, because like I've done it before. I've made like lists of like women-owned places and queer-owned places. It's hard just because and this is a great thing, it keeps changing. There keeps being like new stuff out there. So I think that sometimes the best way to do is just like to Google something like queer beer, you know, or, you know, just put in some of the tag words and just do a search for it.
Okay, Betsy and Alison, you have something to add?
Yeah, so this is kind of like the cheater's route, I think, but I like to look at a queer-owned brewery, winery, anyone that you're looking at, spirits, look at who they're following on social media. Oftentimes they're finding their own community, and it's a really great way to find, you kind of close your own loop really quickly with like, they're following these 6 people, none of them are following this person. And Pamela, maybe it's speaking to something you're saying where it's like, they might be queer owned, but the focus isn't on community, right? So like you can figure it out pretty quickly on your own of who do you want to carry, who do you not want to carry, who are they following, and is that a cool org? Yeah.
And John?
I just want to say that there really should be a directory, but in the meantime, there actually is like a National Game Lesbian Chamber of Commerce. It's for all companies, and it's not hardly exhaustive, but it's a good place to start. And then for better or worse, a lot of outlets, publications will publish like every June, you get the, here's 10 queer food, drink brands to support this year. And so they're out there, they publish it every June, but they stay on the internet for all year round. So yeah, Google search.
Yeah, I would completely say the way that I found a lot of producers is by going to events, but also like looking at who people follow. If I meet someone who's in the community and is a queer winemaker, then it's like, who are they following and posting, and what events are they going to? And then just like talking to people.
Next question. What do you think would be the biggest change that the beverage industry could make that would make a really big impact for queer folks? Is there anyone who wants to jump in to that? Feel free to raise your hand. Okay, well then I'll choose my first victim. Liz.
Oh, I mean, we can say that alcohol is a social lubricant and it does get people talking. And so just having more of these events where we're drinking alongside each other can lead to so much, whether it's like policy changes or, community civic changes. Specifically, that's a hard question. I mean, mainly it would just be having more queer makers in, doing their thing and thriving.
Perfect. Pamela.
I think taking a stand. When I see companies that are, and I don't mean like pink washing, but like actually really doing something, like saying, you know what, we're just not going to support this other company because of what they do, like whether it's something like, I don't know, Chick-fil-A, or companies that are Hobby Lobby, companies that are notoriously homophobic and transphobic, companies that continue to do business in places that have, horrendous oppressive laws. I mean, I would say, like, I would love to see some wine companies say, you know what, we're just not going to do any business in the state of Florida. Right. And I know there are a lot of, that's a hard one, because there are a lot of great people in Florida. I know people in Florida who are queer, but I just feel like sometimes you need to really take a stand, and that makes a difference to me. I mean, when I find out, like, certain things about people's politics, that impacts whether or not I'm going to want to do business with them, for sure. And I mean, I just feel like anyone who continues to do business with other companies that are, that continue to support homophobic and transphobic and racist and sexist, people and politicians, like, I sort of feel like, no. I mean, like, I would love to see there be a mass exodus off of Twitter within the wine industry. I don't see that happening. I mean, I deactivated my account. Not that I used it that much. I know a few people who did, but I would love to see a lot of people in the wine industry say, screw, we're not using Twitter anymore.
John, go ahead.
I just wanted to thank you, Pamela, for saying that. I migrated from Twitter to Tumblr, and it's so much better. And also, as far as taking a stand is concerned, this is pretty inside baseball, but if you look at the history of the people who own Uline, speaking of taking a stand, huge Republican donors. So audit your supply chain if you can.
And look at the supply chain social media to see who they're shouting out, and then don't go with them. It's like, truly, social media is going to give you the answers you need. You just creep. I call myself a little FBI for Facebook. You just get on there and you just, like, you can figure out real quick who you don't want to work with and who you do.
Great. Here's a cute one. How does the Lady J team continue to be so damn awesome, loving, and supportive? Y'all are truly an inspiration.
We didn't plant that, but I think I know who asked that one.
We know you. We see you.
I don't know. We exist in the world, and something that we don't talk a lot about in these conversations is, like, the burnout and how hard it is to have to feel responsible to be in these spaces and to be leaders in an industry. And it's really hard. And there, like Alison had said, like, there's days where you just don't want to do it. And it sometimes, people will ask questions about something going on in the beer industry. I got a lot of requests for interviews after beer had its Me Too movement a couple of years ago. And I keep just being like, I don't know, like, ask straight white dudes what they're doing to change this, because I'm so sick of being responsible for this stuff. And so I think Lady J just unfortunately being unique in the craft beer space, I don't know, makes people like us more than they should. I don't know. I mean, we're nice people. We're fun to hang out with.
Our beer is really good. That's our slogan is Great Beer, Better World on purpose, to be like, if we're not doing one, we don't have the other. That's just, like, an important fact for us. But we aren't able to give back to our community if we're making crappy product. And no one in the community is going to want to partner with us if we're making crappy product, right? So we're focused on making really good craft beverage that is not pretentious, that is door opening, that is accessible for all, while also partnering with the community, uplifting their voices and making sure that their stories are the ones that are heard, because we literally do not exist without the community that surrounds us.
And it would just really be nice to not be so special anymore. It would really just be wonderful to have more queer folks in the industry, queer folks in leadership, queer folks in ownership, and also, you know, women also doing this work. I would love to see more Black and brown women being able to hold the leadership positions in the work that we do. So there's always going to be steps to be taken to not be so great, I guess. I mean, like, I always want to be great. I want our product to be great. I want our beer to be amazing all of the time, but I don't want to be a unicorn anymore. Like, I'm sort of over that.
Yeah, it's exhausting. It was the Club Q shooting was like, what do we do? And it's like, we're asking you, friends. We don't feel safe. We don't believe that Lady Justice is a safe space. We can't promise that to you. We can promise you space and community, but we can't promise it's safe, because I don't think that's a physical promise anymore. And that's a really hard message to have to put out. Yeah.
Pamela, I saw you had something to add.
I did not. I'm sorry. I need to.
Okay. Okay. Let's see if there's anything else. I think we may have covered this for the most part, but maybe we could talk about some like more concrete things, including like financial/capital stuff. What are some strengths that you need to have in this business? And anyone who wants to start, or maybe John, yes, please.
I think I say this as someone who doesn't have this, but like you almost need to be like delusionally confident. I tried to raise money for a business, VC, pitching myself, and if you display like any ounce of self-doubt in these spaces, then you're done. And I think that as queer people, we're basically, our whole existence is wrapped in doubt from birth. So being able to unlearn that is something I still haven't done, and the reason why I'm shutting down my company. But I think that just constantly getting better at being like, you know what, actually, like I am the shit, and you have to learn to get on board with that and like take it or leave it. And it's hard to learn, and you just need to keep reminding yourself every day. But I wish I had more of it.
Yes, Betsy, Alison, go for it.
So just as being queer, just as being someone who is not represented accurately in the beverage space, right, which many of us could probably speak to, creative funding is the way in which we came to be. So we have yet to get a bank loan, and that's not for lack of trying. And we know that there are other people out there who look like us, who are also excluded from the beverage community, are going through the same thing. And so we speak that pretty publicly. And we started with an Indiegogo campaign that helped fund us in 8 days. And on our final day, we were the top Indiegogo campaign, along with the country of Greece, which was like a wild experience. That they were just like, hey, we're going to start an Indiegogo because we're in financial ruin. Also, do you want to support this queer brewery idea? Like, it was a very strange moment. But that said, like, creative funding is how we function. And I'm going to say it again, when you show up for your community is going to show up for you. And so actually proactively doing it and not doing it performatively, give to queer spaces more than June, give to Black spaces more than February, right? Like, there's so much to be said about what actually being in community is. And our community knows that we do our best to talk the talk and not just walk the walk. So that's how we've stayed open. We're grateful for our patrons for that reason. It's actually being a community partner, actually being socially and fiscally responsible and doing so, and having that social enterprise mindset has kept us going.
And on that note, if no one else has anything to add, I'm gonna pass it over to Vanessa. But first, I want to say thank you so much for taking the time to do this. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Okay, so now I have to like have all these beverages now. I just want to go on a beverage tour. This was so freaking amazing. Thank you guys so much for your time, for your knowledge, for your support. Not only just in your own spaces, but just to each other. So thank you to the attendees that came. Please, again, follow all these amazing people, follow QFF. Thank you again to Bento Box for sponsoring these amazing panels for the year. It's the last one for the year, and hopefully we'll have more great conversations. A few house notes for QFF. We will be launching our queer food directory at the beginning of the year. So please look out for that. It's gonna be a really awesome safe space directory for people to get to know each other just like this. And we'll also be launching our nationwide tour of Queer Food Fest. So hopefully you'll be able to support and meet these people in person and get to buy from them and love on them hopefully in the future. But thank you guys so much, and I hope you have an amazing afternoon, and we'll see you soon.
Thank you so much.